My name is Deacon Lisa Geiger, and I'm going to kick things off for us. Colleen has a PowerPoint presentation to share. There it is. I titled this workshop this way because I actually have a t-shirt that says that I had gotten a few years ago from one of the synods out west. And I would say to you that deacons are the duct tape and most of the time the WD-40, I think, that keeps the church going. Which is not to say that pastors don't do a variety of things, but I think deacons have a little bit broader scope of how we help serve the church. And so you'll hear each of the five of us speak a little bit about how we got into our call and what our calls look like, and hopefully that will give you some variety. And I'm going to let our premier deacon, Lavela Stevens, she's going to start us off with a little history, as that was part of her journey.
Thank you, Lisa. My sense of call began with a desire to work through social agencies, and so I applied to Lenore College in the sociology department. Then, before I even started college, I visited the Lenore campus high school day, and when I saw a petite young student playing her Bach piece on the performance organ, I immediately fell in love with the idea of studying music. That began my 6-year education in sacred music as I spent 2 years in Ohio at Wittenberg University, getting a master's degree in organ performance. My father was a Lutheran pastor, and a colleague of his suggested I look into a new program called Certified Lay Professional, which encouraged people working in the church to get education in subjects such as Lutheran theology, church history, and Bible studies, along with the specific classes in our own fields of interest. At that time, there were 4 areas covered: Christian education, youth leadership, church administration, and music. So I began attending August conferences at Caroline Furnace for the candidacy process, along with the seminary students, and followed the program of study, interviews, filling out forms, and filling out more forms over those early years, because this new program was under constant review and reform for quite a few years. I joined the roster by certification in 1981. The process certainly helped shape my sense of call and service to the church, because it guided me to become more conscious of how I handled my position as church organist. I was very aware that I represented the rostered leadership of my church, and I was also able to connect with other certified lay professionals in Region 9. We gathered for fellowship, worship, and study that was instrumental in giving me support. When the LCA, which was the Lutheran Church in America, merged with the other Lutheran church bodies and became the ELCA in 1988, our lay rostered membership also combined with the other predecessor groups of lay leaders, who of course had different titles and histories. Our combined group became known as Associate in Ministries, often referred to as AIMS. We were eventually grandfathered in, but not before the 2 of us who represented the Virginia Synod actually reapplied for the rostered position by filling out forms and interviewing again with representatives from the Virginia Synod office. This gave me a time to reevaluate my call and to restate my support of the process. At that time, when you were called to a congregation, you were consecrated instead of being certified. I am now serving as music director at Holy Trinity in Wytheville, and I have been there since 1993. I feel it is such a privilege to be able to work with people in the church through weekly and yearly worship, and also through participating as organist at times of baptisms, weddings, and funerals, to provide music for comfort and enjoyment, and also for the intrinsic value to life that music brings. Currently, as deacons, which is now the title for all ministers of word and service, we are ordained instead of being consecrated. The process has certainly evolved, and it is a joy to serve in the Virginia Synod. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm next in this. I put us in order of ordination. So yes. Oh, nope. Sorry. It's Deacon Liz.
My name is Deacon Liz Brendle Fox. I have been a deacon or an associate ministry since 2011. I started off doing youth and family ministry within the church, and now I'm doing more of the service ministry outside of the church. Right now I work for Hampton Healthy Families, that is about serving all families in Hampton with preventative resources, but better yet, yoking people to resources immediately. With my job, I do postpartum screenings to get people to counseling, work with ACEs, and also on top of that, navigating some of those resources even in the church to serve our families, like diaper drives, believe it or not. So I love that. I get to see the difference every day when you meet with a family that you've been working with domestic violence, substance abuse, and different things. And love being a deacon, you know?
Liz, what's ACEs?
So what I do is a lot of times what we do is check for milestone ministries, like milestones within children's development, just to make sure like kids are hitting their milestones and we're not seeing any delays. So that's one of the jobs that I love doing. At the same point, can be very heartbreaking, but I love it.
Thanks.
No problem.
As I said at the beginning of this presentation, I'm Deacon Lisa Geiger. I serve in the parish at St. Michael in Virginia Beach. I suppose my sense of call really started a long time ago with the first vicar at my church when I was a member at Emmanuel Lutheran, who had lots of talks with me about doing things like the Acts program that the Synod did, encouraged me to go back and do some more formal education. I spent the first 2/3 of my life. For 30 years, I worked in IT. I did computer training and user support, and then ended up being a Navy contractor for 26 years at Navy headquarters here in Norfolk, Virginia. And I was a senior project manager for Honeywell by the time I left, managing all of the networking and IT support out there. But in 2009, I had gone to the vocations conference. There was a gentleman, I always tell this story, at the base who would come and visit with me once a week. And he used to ask me the question all the time, what do you want to do when you grow up? And my answer was always, I don't know, but I think I'd like to work for the church. And so I think I just didn't pay attention soon enough, but I suppose God's time is God's time. And at the ripe young age of 50, I finally figured out with some conversation when I took a job at First Lutheran Church with Pastor Garris that perhaps I should go back and consider candidacy again. I came in at the tail end of the Associates in Ministry program as we were transitioning into the deacon title and collective thing. Someone have a question? We're going to do question and answer at the end of the thing. At the end of our slides, we'll give you time. Anyway, I find myself, I like the title and the WD-40 because most of the time you'll see deacons, sometimes pastors, as like Lavela, a church musician, like Phyllis and Emily and Liz out in the world doing things as we are connected to. But my specialty is church administration. And so I find myself inside the parish, but doing all kinds of things. So in the last 2 weeks, I was telling Pastor Kelly when she was with us, I was outside with a can of WD-40 and a plastic spatula, getting the old magnet that was stuck on our church van off the side of the van. I try to keep things in good order and get us ready for Sunday worship, working with our church administrator. But then on the other side of that coin, last night I went to be with a family to do commendation of the dying for their mother, who was in hospice care and was been told she was actively dying. And I preach and I did women's Bible study. And so I feel like the best way I can tell you is what I do at the parish. And sometimes in my work with the Synod, I have the pleasure of serving for Bishop Milton as the candidacy process administrator and secretary of the assembly. I do feel like it's duct tape and WD-40 because I never know what my day is going to be quite like. But I am so grateful that the Holy Spirit kept knocking on my shoulder, and I can't imagine doing anything else at this point in my life.
Hey, so I am Emily Edmonds, and I am a hospital staff chaplain. So for myself, I I was always heavily involved in church. I always really enjoyed doing that with my family, though I was raised Methodist initially. But when we eventually cruised on over to the Lutheran church, I got pretty heavily involved. But ministry is never really anything that I considered for myself. I was always drawn towards very creative, very expressive fields. And I just didn't see those two worlds coming together or fitting in any sort of way. But I was drawn to young adults and global mission, YAGM, here through the ELCA. And I was accepted into that program and went and served. And that was the first time that my mind started to understand the vast variety of ways that you can serve God and your community. It really opened my eyes to the flexibility and the creativity that can come with that, which is interesting because I had a wonderful deacon in my life for a long time and never knew it because Lavela taught me piano for many years when I was a child. But I never knew that, and I never knew really that was something really beautiful and a part of her ministry as well. Because as a kid, it's just like, oh, that's just Miss Lavela doing her thing. But really, it's such a wonderful part of her gift. And so for myself, when I was reaching the end of my year of serving in young adults and global mission in Australia, I began to really discern what I wanted to do next. And I thought it would be to return to this, I consider it the new way of global ministry, which is a lot less about conversion or evangelizing and so much more about being in community and reaching the heart of people and being with them. I was really drawn to that, and so I began seminary. And as so many of us found out, clinical pastoral education is required. So I did my unit of CPE, and the rest is history. I completely fell in love with it. I love working in a clinical setting. I love the structure. I love the variety, and find it tremendously fulfilling to be in that place of so much joy and healing and recovery, and also the place of so much heartbreak and death. That's life in a very small nutshell, right? And specifically, I've chosen to specialize in acute psychiatric care, and that is my role now. I'm specifically the psych chaplain. And so my day varies a lot. I can do individual visits with patients in much the same way a therapist would. And then I also facilitate multi-faith spirituality groups when I get a whole group of people together. I do a full age range at my hospital. Typically, our psych patients, the youngest we can have is as young as 5, and then all the way up to someone in their 90s. And so these are people who are sometimes voluntary and sometimes not, and they're forced to seek treatment in a hospital for a minimum of 3 days and can be much longer than that. And so I am tremendously honored to be able to walk with them and their spiritual needs. As a chaplain, we are trained to be as ecumenical and as multi-faith as possible. And so it has allowed me to flex that creativity in a really fun way. And I have been board certified through the APC this past year. So I've managed to become officially official as a chaplain. But the reason I chose to do that through the word and service roster as opposed to word and sacrament, because a chaplain could do either, is because I genuinely felt like it captured my call so well and what I saw myself doing in this world perhaps better than word and sacrament for me personally. And so that's why I was drawn to that roster. And I don't regret it one bit. It totally suits me. So, like others have shared, I'm proud to be a deacon. I'm honored to be a chaplain and a part of this community. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it on over to my sister over here.
Hi, I'm Sister Phyllis Cox, and the reason I use the name sister is because I am a deacon, but I am also a sister in the deaconess community of the ELCA, which is separate from being a deacon, but is pretty much the same. The deaconess community is a group of women intentionally dispersed all over the United States and Canada. And we keep each other in our prayers constantly. We are supportive of each other. And Emily didn't say, but she is in the process of joining the community at some point. And I love being a deaconess. I love having that many people I can call sister, and knowing how we rejoice for each other, and we also mourn each other whenever we have joys and sorrows in our lives. As a deacon in the Virginia Synod of the ELCA, I'd serve two different roles. I am a regional faith outreach coordinator with Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, which is an environmental advocacy group that collaborates as people of faith to grow healthy communities and advance climate justice through education, advocacy, and worship. And I work in the areas of the Shenandoah Valley and Roanoke Valleys. And my work is never quite the same 2 days in a row. One day I may be talking with someone about doing a presentation, and the next I may be making telephone calls about pieces of legislation that are going through the General Assembly. And the next day I may be doing a tree planting. So it's interesting work. The other part of what I do is I am a supply preacher and serve currently two different parishes. One is a 2-point parish, and one is my home congregation, because my home congregation is currently without a pastor. So pretty much every Sunday I am in the pulpit preaching and leading service. And then during the week, I get to work with Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. My call originated when, well, I guess a long time ago, but it came to the surface when somebody asked me what I was going to do when I retired. And I said, I'm not sure. And then God started nudging me into the idea of going to seminary, and everything fell into place. I graduated in 2021 from Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary in Columbia, South Carolina, with a master's degree in Christian ministry. And I chose that because I really wanted to work in the field of advocacy, but I also love preaching. So that's why I enjoy both parts of my life. But really, my first and foremost favorite job is being Mimi to Theo. All right, Lisa, I'm done.
Thank you, Phyllis. So we thought we'd do what we call Mythbusters. Even though the deacon roster has been official in the ELCA for the last 6 years, there's still a lot of confusion, I think, sometimes amongst people in congregations, even amongst colleagues sometimes. I'm grateful for Pastor Kelly and Bishop Milton and all those who help kind of lift up the role of deacons in the life of the church. They're working very hard to help us. I will ask you true or false, but you're going to see a pattern here. So true or false, deacons are pastors in training. The answer
No.
of course is false.
False.
False. Deacons are pastors' assistants.
No.
Also
False.
deacons want to be pastors.
False.
Oh. So let me say this about that third bullet, just to give you kind of a context. And I think people are sometimes innocent in their questions because this is a cultural thing, right? We're so used to pastors in the church. And as Lavela went through, there were lots of different titles. So like I said, deacons and kind of understanding that as a rostered role is still kind of coming into its own. And I will not reveal names to protect the not innocent. But just a couple of months ago, I had a colleague visit with us at worship at St. Michael. I happened to be preaching. And they came up to me after worship and was chatting with me and complimenting me on my sermon. And I said, thank you, and appreciate the kind words. And then I was asked this question. Is there any thought in the church that, once you all have been deacons for 5 or 10 years, that they're just going to go, they should just go ahead and make you pastors? And I said, well, I don't want to be a pastor. I'm not called to be a pastor. I'm called to be a deacon. And I got a very surprised, oh. So it was really surprised me because this colleague had been in the ministry for a long time. So I will say for myself, and I'm sure my fellow deacons on here, I said this at a vocations conference a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. I do not feel any lacking in my call because I'm not administering the sacraments. I feel completely fulfilled in my call as a deacon in word and service in all the crazy ways that I help, whatever way that is, that the gifts God's given me help get us ready for worship or do any number of things. So deacons do not want to be pastors. Becoming a deacon takes less time and education than becoming a pastor.
False.
False, which is false. Of course, you just heard many of us talk about our education. Pastors outrank deacons because
Yeah,
they
sure.
administer the sacraments. Did somebody just say that's true?
I said, yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, sure. And the last one we tried to think of some is, of course, that deacons are not clergy, which is also false. So I think, again, for myself and hopefully my other deacon friends here would echo that sentiment. Ways you can help is to remember those things and help advocate for us. You heard Lavela say she was originally certified and then consecrated. I intentionally put on all of our slides the language of ordination because we've been grandfathered. That is the language. All of what we were is now considered ordained. And we are all clergy, just like pastors are clergy. And so we're getting there. But even our mother church, the ELCA, still has a lot of work to do. If anybody has access to Sundays and Seasons, you'll see that the language in our documents to prepare bulletins and things, I don't believe has been changed yet. And the cruel irony of that is the person that's in charge of that is a deacon. So we have a long way to go.
I also want to say, Lisa, pastors and deacons don't outrank lay people either. We're all in the
Correct.
priesthood of believers, right? So we all have to
Correct.
remember that. all the
Yes,
way
it's just we
aboard.
feel different ways we felt called to serve in a different way, but that's
Mhm.
correct. Pastors don't outrank deacons and deacons and pastors don't outrank the laity. I'm not going to go as far as to say Bishop Milton doesn't outrank me because I know she's in this session. So I am going to behave for the bishop, so I will let her. But that's our presentation, and we have question and answer time. I believe we have a few minutes if anybody wants to ask us anything.
The only thing that I would say, Lisa, is deaconess does not just mean that you're a female deacon. Deaconess is the deaconess community.
And we do have some male deacons. They're just not here with us tonight.
That's right.
That's what I wanted to make sure everybody knew, that there are men who are deacons as well. Our younger son, Chandler, is a deacon down in North Carolina, and he has worked in, he's worked for Lutheran, oh, shoot, my mind just went blank. But he's also worked in Lutheran Outdoor Ministry, and he's currently working for a community, a Christian community ministry in Asheville, North Carolina, which is a multi-denominational type of, it is not a Lutheran ministry, but that's his call right now, is to that ministry that does all kinds of ministries in the Asheville and Buncombe County area.
Excellent. Thank you. I think we, Laura, do you have a question?
Yes, someone had mentioned about the sacraments. Are deacons allowed to preside over the sacraments?
No, that's really the delineation. If it, when people ask me what's the difference between pastor and deacon, I say the easiest nutshell answer is I don't do baptism or communion. So deacons do not do sacraments. I can do a funeral. I have done funerals. I did the commendation of the dying last night. I could marry people if I wanted to do the work of going to the city and getting licensed, and I intentionally don't do that because I don't want to marry anybody. So the real line in the sand is that we don't do baptism or communion. We don't do the sacraments. Everything else we do, though, we preach and do Bible studies and all kinds of other things, but not the sacrament.
And if you want Lisa to do your wedding or your funeral, I do those.
Yeah, Phyllis can do those. Anybody else? Any questions? Leslie, are you waving? You're just waving your hand, or?
I'm trying to get to my unmute button. Sister Phyllis, I thought that I heard a couple of years ago that the deaconess community was getting rid of their gender requirement.
No.
Am I confused?
No, we are a community of women.
Okay.
Women.
Gotcha. I don't know what I had in my mind then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I will say a couple years ago, what you may be thinking of is we made the intentional public show of support for those who were perhaps not born biologically women, but who are women. So perhaps that is what you are thinking of, that we wish to welcome all women.
But they need to be women.
Yes.
I will also
Mother.
add a myth buster that's for pastors and deacons, because I've been asked this a couple of times, as was my former colleague. Pastors and being a pastor and a deacon is often a full-time job. We were actually in a store and somebody said, "Oh, I didn't know Deacon Lisa worked here." And I said, "I don't work in the store. I actually work at the church, because you called me and you voted on the spending plan that has my salary in it." But there's lots of people I've had, especially it's fun when the kids ask me, "You mean you work here during the week?" I'm like, I work here during the week. They're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, all kinds of things." So lots of times our calls, especially in a parish, are full-time work. So other questions or myths or things?
Actually, I'm a little confused about the communion part, because I seem to remember at our church at one time, we had lay people that were designated to go to shut-ins, and the pastor did the consecration. And then
Correct.
he took it out with the words. So I guess it's the pastor has to consecrate it first. That's what you're saying. The actual
Yes.
consecration.
Yeah.
can't-
You probably have Eucharistic ministers,
Yeah.
which lots of congregations do, but those elements are blessed probably
But-
during the time of service by the pastor, and then they're taken out by others. Mhm.
Okay. Talking it out loud made me remember more of the details of that. I see. So you could give communion if somebody else had done the consecration, Eucharistic consecration first. Okay.
Yes.
Like any other lay person.
Yes.
Emily? Yeah, I used to work at for Centra before I retired.
Oh,
And yeah, I used to be the librarian there. I retired in 2019, so before you probably got there. I'm curious. I know you work with the psych patients. Do you ever work with the emergency, like the emergency psych cases, or do you get them after they've already gone through the emergency department, the emergency screening?
Sure. So I work once they've gone through the emergency department and they've been officially marked as needing to be committed for treatment. And so once that happens, they will go ahead and be transferred over. I work specifically at Virginia Baptist Hospital. And so the official psych ward, once they've been deemed to need that level of treatment, then I take over. I also work with Pathways, our substance use recovery center, and Bridges, which is a residential acute facility for children where the average stay is 1 year. And so we go ahead and take over their schooling and any aspect like that. And we have weekly therapy with them for an entire year of their life. So
You work a regular shift, or are you on call?
both. So I work full time, and then I am also on call 1 week a month on average. In which case, I then do have to go to the ED, which is very scary for me because I don't go to that hospital a lot. And then when I do, it's in like an emergency situation, and they keep adding new parking spots and new places to that hospital, and yeah, that's a whole situation.
Imagine how much has changed in 5 years. I
Mhm.
know that when I left, that they separated out the intake for psych patients into the old school of nursing building. I don't know if they still do that or not, to sort of separate them from the other traffic coming through the ED department. I won't bore the rest of our people with that. But I wonder, do they still do that, separate them out so it makes it easier to evaluate
Yeah.
them?
And they've actually improved that. So now we have what's called an empath unit, which is the first in Virginia. And the whole purpose of it is to hopefully prevent patients from needing to be committed if they don't, in fact, need to be. And so it allows us to keep a patient overnight or maybe 2 days to hook them up with different resources to hopefully prevent them from having to come over to my hospital if they don't need to, because that can be very scary if a patient really doesn't need to be admitted to a psych unit. So it's hopefully that prevention to where, okay, let's get you resources you need, you're really struggling, but you don't actually need to go in for as intensive care as what we provide. And so, yes, we do have that now, and hopefully that will continue spreading.
And you get to have, you and all the other staff have input into these programs.
Somewhat, yeah.
I know Centra is very hierarchical, but hopefully you have some input to bring your ideas into that, and your ministry into that.
Yeah, not necessarily to get things going, but certainly afterwards we make our opinion known.
I will just offer one other thing in as you start to think about deacons. So in the Lutheran Church, we're ordained ministers, like pastors, right? We're clergy. But I'm currently in a program at St. Leo University, and I don't know why my brain didn't think about this, but Catholic deacons, that's a extra job for them. So they don't get paid to do that. They all work full-time jobs, and then they serve as deacons preaching and Of course, in the Catholic Church, they can do baptisms and some things. And I keep trying to convince them if they just come over to the Lutheran Church, we'd pay them to do all the things that they're enjoying doing. And then I think, Emily, you were saying in the Presbyterian Church or the Episcopal Church?
Episcopal Church.
Episcopal Church, it's a stepping stone or no?
Yeah, so all pastors and all priests in the Episcopal tradition do have to be a deacon, and then some remain deacons for life, and some continue on to be priests. And so, but everyone has to have, on average, between a year or 2 years of being a deacon before they can be pastor.
Yeah,
And
and
in the
it's my
Baptist,
understanding, Church of the Good Shepherd, where I belong, is a Episcopal Lutheran congregation, and I'm learning. I've been there for 19 years, and I'm still learning about the Episcopalians. But
yes.
there are two types of deacons in the Episcopal Church. There is the transitional deacon that you were talking about, when a person comes out of seminary. With a call to word and sacrament, they become a deacon first, and they work under the tutelage and the leadership and mentorship of a priest, and for usually a year or so before they're ordained a priest. And then there is the type of deacon that you all are, and many others who are called to the ministry of word and service, and they remain a deacon.
Thank you, Pat. Probably the most familiar place you've heard deacons before is our good, and my best friend is our good Southern Baptist brothers and sisters. The men serve as deacons, and that's sort of their governing body, like our church council. But those are lay positions that serve as, again, a governing body within a congregation, different from the Catholic deacons, even though that's not a paid call, so to speak. They go through a whole program just like we do for candidacy. I went and saw a friend of mine who got ordained as a Catholic deacon, and they have to do a 2 or 3 year program as well. And they go through ordination. So they're ordained as deacons in the Catholic Church. It's just a volunteer position as opposed to what we're doing here in the Synod.
So Laura has.
Laura has a question. Yeah.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
who had the question?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. It's kind of twofold. One, what is like the length and such of the education that you are required to go through? And did you all have like pre-college degrees before you could go into this, or did you just go into the seminary portion?
So I can speak on.
Go ahead. Who's answering, Liz? Go ahead.
So I can speak on what I went through 10 years ago. I know some things have changed in those 10 years. Well, we won't go 10 years. It's 13 almost. But I had to have a 4-year bachelor's degree. And then would go through a discernment process like a pastor would, as far as like meet with the assistant to the bishop and then do approval, endorsement, and entrance. And then as well as I had 2 years of seminary, I had an internship on top of it. It was before the CPE requirement went through. Now there's a CPE. Is that correct, Emily? I want to say that correctly. But most of the time you have to have a 4-year and then a 2-year from one of a theological school, and then even sometimes a Lutheran year with that if you went to a different divinity school.
As of now, the process for both rosters is identical. So once they consolidated the rosters, the candidacy process, deacons and pastors go through the exact same thing. They go through school, they go through CPE, they go through all the stages of candidacy. It's just they end up serving in the 2 different roles. But prior to that,
And when I came through, it was all over the board with who could be in and who could be out. And we had 2 levels. If you had a master's, and then just the undergraduate, and it came and went in all the evaluations. So it's good that it's consolidated now and set. Yeah.
other questions? Other myths you would like us to dispel? Oh, deacons can wear clerics. I get home, I was lazy. I took mine off. I don't wear mine at Monday through Friday. So yes, your deacons can wear clerics.
When you see us at Synod, we're easy to spot because we
Yeah.
have the stole across.
Yes, that help you identify us as well. We do, like
Yeah.
Emma said, we're the single diagonal stall. Well, I thank everybody for coming to our presentation. I thank my fellow deacons for being here. Thank you, Bishop Milton. I see you clapping.